Okay, so verbally, we have said what the functions of bone are, but I don't think we've gotten through all of them because I was looking forward a little bit on what's on the schedule for today, and I see blood cell formation is, for instance, we might get to that today. I kind of lost the order, lost track of where we're going, but can anyone name some of the, I gave you one of the functions of bone, but I didn't say what the process was. It's kind of hard to say that word, kind of like you might think sternocleidomastoid or some of them longer terms, or cholestocanin. It's you know what the term is, it's just kind of hard to say. But the process of making blood cells, do we know what that's called? Starts with an H. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to say. I like the look on your face. Yeah, hematopoiesis. That's how I would go about saying that. That's one function. What's another function of bones before we get too far? Because in an indirect manner, you are using your skeletal system right now. Not just because you're producing red blood cells, that's true too. But for instance, you're checking things off with your right hand. You are, what would you say, fidgeting with your water bottle or, okay? Yeah. Bones actually help you with movement because muscles actually attach to those, okay? You're sitting upright, so what's that then? We talk about that, so we sit up. Yeah, that's fine. They provide support, okay? Probably the most obvious one we haven't talked about or we haven't said yet today, okay? Protection, and then the last one we kind of touched upon last semester with hormonal action. Parathyroid hormone and that's true. What about calcitonin? What does it do? You said it just pushes that calcium back into the bone tissue, and so that lowers the concentration of calcium in the blood. So if calcium is a mineral, which it is, and it's pushing it into the bone tissue, bones must store minerals in. That would be the fifth and final one. Okay. So how did we say you can keep osteoclasts separate from osteoblasts? Yeah, so the osteoblast will build bone tissue where the osteoclast then actually takes it away. Okay. So bone functions, we verbally said these, haven't wrote them down. And these kind of go hand in hand because yes, your cranium protects your brain, the rib cage protects your heart and lungs, and these bones also have muscle attachments to give you support. Not only just the support, but then also give you movement then as well. So in general, we're saying the skull protects 4 of the 5 senses and the brain. So in an indirect way, which sense is not being protected in the brain? Yeah, the brain deciphers it, but it's not where you typically find your senses. Where are the majority of your nerve endings found? Just take a guess. It's going to go through there, yes. Say that again. Okay, you're getting true. But see, when we say head and face, that's more so on the outside because, okay, so think of some of our senses. From the side, your sight is protected by your skull. Obviously, your brain is protected by your skull. Your nose, where it's deciphered, your olfactory bulbs is protected. Okay, and then you had this structure, something meatus. External auditory meatus, there's 4, so then the 5th one, okay, how do you know something is cold? Yeah, so then majority of those are in your hands, fingers, toes, okay? That's where the majority of your nerve endings are, which is not going to be a part of the protection in the skull, okay? So the ribs will protect thoracic organs. What would that be? What's a thoracic organ? Organ found in the thorax. Yeah, that's true. 2 main ones, but 2 of them are together. You have a left and a right. Lungs, and of course, your heart, okay? So movement, levers, okay? Different types. The most common levers, and this might be wrote down for you, are fingers, because they bend like this, okay? The most obvious would be where and where for a lever, okay? Knees, okay? Elbows, then if you think about it enough, it's kind of like a swings on a swivel. Your finger does, your knee does, your elbow does, and your wrist. Yep. Okay? All right. So, do we have 8 fingers and 2 thumbs? Or do we just have 10 fingers? I would say there's 8 fingers and okay. Can you possibly think of I believe there's 9 different classifications of joints. So with these, your thumbs, knees, elbows, we're talking about hinge joints, okay? And you're not responsible for all 9 of them. I think that would be kind of silly, but rather just stick with some of the more obvious, okay? So hinge, okay? This is maybe a little bit of a less obvious one, but it is still true because it moves in a circle, and that is your finger. What is a larger joint that also moves around in a circle? Say that again.
Shoulder.
Okay, and then there's also another one that's perhaps a little less obvious. So when you look at that, what does this humerus have at the end? Did you happen to discuss that in health class? Yes, this is the humerus, but did you say what this was? It's a specific structure of the humerus. It's called the head, okay? So is there another bone that would have a round surface like this? Kind of similar to the head of the humerus? My classification or my opinion of that, the ankle is more so of a gliding type of joint. We're not saying that you're wrong, but I think you just pointed at it. You just need to say it now. What looks like this ball and socket? Okay, where at in the hip? What's this guy? Okay, so when we look, oh, maybe you can't see that from where you're sitting, but this is the head of the femur down here, and that sits up into a structure in your pelvic cavity. So your finger, that goes like this, and then you got this movement, and then the same one with your hip. I'm not going to show you my dance moves, so I'll spare you that sight. So with that, those are called ball and sockets. Okay. Then we said the ankle was a gliding joint, and your wrist kind of is a gliding joint as well. Okay, because you can't see it, but do you think you might know how many wrist bones are in here? It's between 3 and 10. Here we're getting in on that oxygen. Whoever said 8 first was correct. Okay. So those, you don't have to know all of them. If I remember right, there's one called like a pisiform, a hamate, a lunate, a scaphoid. I think we're halfway there. A triquartum, maybe. Again, this was a long time ago. I think there's really no reason to go that far in depth, because one of the things that might stick out in your mind, if we were just going to evaluate you on the skull and just bones only, and there were no repeats, what would that maybe be, 12? But you didn't have 12 on there. There were 35. Okay, so I think the sutures is important enough to go over. Some of the different processes on there are important, and also the holes that you'd find in the skull then as well. Okay. Okay, I think we will start talking about joints getting into tomorrow. But one of the aspects I wanted to possibly continue moving forward with is the rest of your axial skeleton. Okay? Do you think, can you name the 2 divisions of your skeletal system? So we said axial is one, that's your cranial region. Then the rest of what you find in the center, which would be your vertebral column and your rib cage. Okay? Now, that's your axial skeleton. What would you consider your arms and legs? What do you suppose those are? Starts with the letter A, just like axial does. Get this behind here. Okay. My lab assistant here, if you want to look at it that way. They've been here a while. Been here a long time. Yeah. Him or her, I don't know. Really don't have a name for him. But regardless, okay, I'll keep going. You have appendages, okay? And that would be your arms and legs. That's your appendicular skeleton, okay? Now, you might say, well, why is the hip down here part of the appendicular skeleton, or do you perhaps, this is not part of the axial skeleton, nor is this, and the rest of this, that's part of the, I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. This is part of the appendicular skeleton. It's not part of the axial type, because that's where this actually attaches to the central framework. So when we're talking about the axial skeletal system, we've got the skull here, the vertebral column, and then your rib cage. Your clavicle, I almost said sacrum, that's not right. Clavicle, because the sacrum's down here. why has this left my mind? You got your clavicle, scapula, there we go. Scapula, and then the different structures associated with that. And then you've got your ilium, ischium, and ischial tuberosity. Those are part of the appendicular skeleton because again, that is where your appendage is attached to the central framework. So, to me, I don't know. The skull is maybe somewhat difficult, but in my mind, this next one's probably a little more tough, just because it's a little more detail-oriented because of the different types of structures. There's only basically 3 types of bones on here, because notice we had just 8 in the cranium alone, but here you have a set of 7, a set of 12, then a set of 5, then again your sacrum and coccyx. Do you perhaps know the division of the vertebrae that you see in the vertebral column? There are 3 types. Do you perhaps know what they are? Can anyone guess? And I would be led to believe that hopefully it's actually on that list for your next set of bones to know and bone structures. I may have some additions on there, but can you name a set of these vertebrae?
Cervical.
That's 1.
Thoracic.
That's 2. Okay. Now, if we're really good, which ones are which? Which ones are on top?
Lumbar.
Do we think lumbar is on top? Yes? No? Lumbar's down here. Okay. It's actually listed in that order. You got cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. You've got 7 cervical, approximately 12 thoracic, and then 5 lumbar. And then you have the rest of your sacrum and coccyx. Okay? So the reason, again, that can be so detail-oriented is because you have all these different structures on here. Sticking out the back, you have these spinous processes. Out to the side, you have transverse processes. And then you have a hole going down the center in each one of these articulate bones. Why would that be? Just for the same reason there's a hole here. Because what was this called at the base of the skull? Foramen magnum. I almost said magnum foramen, which would be fine too. So if that's what it is, well, why is that hole there? Sort of. Exactly, because that's where the brainstem is, and what does the brainstem attach? So you've got the bridge. So what's that bridge connecting? 2 structures. Up on top is the brain. Below the brainstem then is the spinal cord, spinal column, spinal cord, whichever. Okay. So then, again, goes back to that central question. Why is there a whole bunch of holes in each and every one of these vertebrae? Must be something going through there. Excuse me. Just like what's going through this foramen magnum. Yeah, the spinal cord. Okay. There's also I think it's is there a transverse foramen? Okay. So there's a reason for that, because as your spinal column goes down like this, you also have holes going out the side for each and every one of those peripheral nerves that actually come out from the side and then can go up. Okay? So as you have feeling from your toes, your feet, your leg, whichever. It's traveling up past the femur through the femoral nerve. It gets into this area here of your pelvis, and then it goes through one of them transverse foramens into the spinal column, then up to the brain. It's just the way the body's actually wired. Okay? So we really don't need to get into the specific structures of that right now. The last thing I want to say, and then we'll stop there for today. Of these 7 cervical vertebrae, the top 2 have very specific names. Okay? So notice the head can swivel like this. Okay? So the top 2 is called, it should say on your list, atlas and axis. Correct? Okay? So be careful when you answer this. Which one's on top, the atlas or the axis so the head can swivel?
Atlas. I'm saying that because you didn't say they were right. So.
Okay. Well, to make sense of that, okay, what were these called? Because it's this whole backbone. It's the occipital bone, but then you've got 2 projections around that foramen magnum. Occipital condyle. Okay? Now, who likes Greek mythology? Weren't there 12 labors of Hercules? You know, if we did 12 chapters, we could say, God, we're kind of like Greek mythology, doing 12 labors of anatomy and physiology. But have you heard of the 12 labors of Hercules? In Greek mythology, I believe one of them, he actually tricks Atlas because it was Atlas. How would you say that in a possessive form? Atlas's job? That is right. Atlas's job to hold up what? Actually hold up the world, which I think is kind of silly, but I think that's part of the Greek mythology, that it was his job to hold up the world. So therefore, when we look at this structure, the very top vertebrae is your atlas, because it's got depressions in here that articulate with these, your occipital condyles. Okay? So the atlas is what holds the cranium up. It's the axis, the second one down, that actually allows that to swivel, which is maybe seems counterintuitive, but we would naturally be hardwired to think if it's going to turn, the top one must be the axis. But no, it's actually the second one, because the atlas is up on top and it holds. And to me, the best way to think about that is on the atlas, the articulation is with the occipital condyles. Okay, we have some vocabulary evaluations. There's a lot of them. It's split in half. Okay, there's an evaluation 1, and then there's an evaluation 2. So let's not get too bent out of shape about that for this week. And I realize this is a little early. I would venture to believe that the second evaluation, would probably be, we got Wednesday and Thursday. What order? Now, when I say Wednesday and Thursday, we're talking about the 19th and 20th. So what order would you prefer? Vocabulary on Wednesday, vertebral column on Thursday, or vertebral column on Wednesday, vocab on Thursday? Or we just flip a coin?
Maybe have the vocab quiz after, so we get the hard one done first. And we have more time to study for the vertebral column.
Okay, so vocabulary on Wednesday. That's okay. Asking for input. Okay, So, now the hard part for me to remember that. So, vocab is a V. So we have twice the fun, you put two V's together, what do you get?
W.
That's on Wednesday. I don't know. You won't get those 5 seconds back with that analogy, but okay. So we will pick up with this next time. Was it joints? Was what was up next? Yes. Okay. And then we'll have your short answers. We'll probably hand them out early next week, and then we'll proceed from there. All right. We'll catch up to you next time.